The year was that we met was 1953. I'll give you the version that she likes. I spice mine up a little bit, but I'll let that go. I was in my first year of college. I went to Fort Hays State College, and I roomed with three other guys in a not a dorm, but in a house, and we had the full basement. Maul Burris was her name, had only boys. Back then, you could not have both men and women or boys and girls in the same house. That was a policy that they had. And so in the wintertime, she rented it to boys, and in the summertime, she rented it to women. And so it was right at the end of my freshman year that the college had I think it was a 4-week term particularly for people who were out in the field working that did not have a degree, or they just wanted more. They just wanted to take additional classes. Valeta fell into this category. She was teaching. She went out on a 1-year certificate, which you could do then, and she was teaching and then coming to Hays for that 4-week session to pick up additional hours towards her degree. So that started 4 weeks before the regular semester ended. And so she and another girl came in, and Maul Burris kept it really quiet, but she had a bedroom upstairs that she rented to the two girls until the boys got out. But that was illegal, but she did it. And one of the people that was in the basement with me wanted to date the gal that she was with upstairs, but she wouldn't go with him without someone else going too. In other words, she wouldn't go unless there was a double date. So she had the other guy in the basement asked me if I would take her on a blind date so that he could take the girl he wanted to go with. And so I said, oh, okay, that'll be fine. So that's how we started, and I think we had 2 dates before I left, because I had to go home and farm, and she stayed the rest of the summer. And so that's how we got started. He never went with her again, and I have almost 60 years.
I loved his blue eyes. And when I first saw him, I didn't know him. I used to watch him walk up the sidewalk, and I thought he was the most egotistical person I had ever seen in my life, because he just had that sway as he came up the sidewalk. I thought, oh my goodness, what an egotistical person that is. But that's the way he's always carried himself. He walks very straight. But when we dated and I saw his pretty blue eyes, I thought, wow, those are the prettiest eyes.
Well, I liked the way she looked, and she was very comfortable in talking, and was willing to do whatever I suggested, because I didn't have any money. Not many people did back then, and she was willing and excited about doing just nothing, just driving around or just being together. And it's hard to say, exactly, what the chemistry was, but there wasn't any doubt in my mind by the middle of the summer that's who I wanted to marry.
Well, I think most all of our dates before we got married, we would go to the drive-in theater, and then we usually would go have a Coke or something. It was a root beer, and at that time, I really didn't like root beer, but I wasn't about to tell him I didn't like root beer until after we were married. So, because I didn't want to hurt his feelings because he was doing everything possible to be nice about it.
When we would go out and do things that didn't cost any money or very much money, that was okay with her. She never indicated that she would like to go or do anything else. And we did go to movies once in a while, but even though they didn't cost much, like 25 cents or maybe 50 cents back then, that was still quite a bit of money. And so I really had to watch that. And that was okay with her. And she was agreeable to do just about anything so far as just going out and having a good time. And that's what we did. And I appreciated that. And she smiled all the time. And I think the other thing that I enjoyed was her maturity. I knew that going to college and she was teaching, that was just the kind of person I wanted. You know, my dad was very, very strict, but I could stay out, particularly when I started going with her, and I could stay out unless I didn't have a curfew. Like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, a lot of kids did. But my dad said, do what you want, but at 4:30, you're going to be up. It doesn't matter. And so I know when I started dating her, because she was 35 miles away, and then we would go to a movie or whatever, it would be 1 or 2 o'clock a lot of times when I would get home. So, but still we had to get up at 4:30 and go to work. And so we were writing letters back and forth because she was in Hayes. And and that was 90 miles away. So if I went down to see her, and we went to a movie, or probably didn't go to a movie, we just went out and drove around and parked. And by the time I'd get home, it was 1 o'clock at least. My dad believed that if you didn't have the tractor running by 6 o'clock, you just well stay in bed all day. And so that's. So anyway, I was really tired, particularly through the week, because I knew I wasn't going to get any rest through that, because we work 7 days a week in the summertime. And so my sister helped me out some. I would go to bed, and she would come in, and I would dictate to her the letter, and she wrote every letter for me that mailed to Valeta.
Our last date in Hayes, Kansas, before he went home to be there all summer. He was a farmer with his dad. His dad was anxious to get him home. And our last date, he said, I may look you up sometime. To me, that meant I'll never see him again. But it was about 2 or 3 weeks later, we lived just a half mile out of town. I happened to go over town, I don't know why I did. And there he was, driving up and down the streets, up and down. It was only 2 blocks, but he was dragging the streets. And he was just about ready to give up. He wasn't about to ask somebody where did I live, because I didn't have an address, but everybody would have known where I lived. And so that's how we started, and we dated all summer. And, well, it wasn't all summer, because on July the 28th, my birthday, he came to Hayes, and he had an engagement ring. And we became engaged on our birthday at a park down in Hayes, Kansas. And we set the date for August the 23rd. Now this is in 1953. We met in April, married in August, and his godmother told him it will never work. but it has worked for 60, almost 60 years.
Actually, I never told my parents that I was going to take a ring down to her, and I don't really know where I got that money to do that, but anyway, I did, and so when I came home, I didn't tell them for probably 2 or 3 weeks that I had asked Valeta to marry me, and she said that she would, and they kind of looked at each other and looked at me, and I thought, well, I don't know how this is going to work out, although our family was close.
I can't remember. My dad never said much of anything. You know, he wasn't a big talker. You had to put a direct question to him to get an answer, and Bill found that out in our marriage, that he had to usually kind of disagree with him on something to get him to talk, you know. So he really didn't say anything, but he was real protective as on our marriage day to take me where people were going to the church that they wouldn't see me till I got there. My mother, she didn't seem to care one way or the other. I think it was one less child leaving home, you know, completely, because I did stay there a lot. You know, when I was even teaching, I would drive to work. Matter of fact, I think they approved, but they never disapproved, as far as I know, on my decision to marry him, even though he was younger. I think they were okay with it, as far as I know.
What happened was that then my dad said, well, how old is she? And because she was teaching, and I told him, and he kind of questioned that, because back then the man was anywhere from 3 to 8, 10 years old, older than the woman, and we reversed that by 3 years, and so he questioned that, and my age, and how was I going to make a living? How could I support, you know, a wife? And so we discussed that, and he could see that I wasn't going to change my mind, and I was 18, and I didn't have to change it, and so that's how it worked out. And then my godmother, we were very close to her, and when she found out, she was really upset. And she told me, Bill, she said, you can get out of this. You don't have to continue this, because it will not work. It just won't. He said, you're too young. You haven't known her very long. She's older than you are. And there's nothing that indicates to me that this marriage is going to work. And I don't know how I handled her advice, but it didn't really have any bearing on anything. I just wish she was around today so that I could show her that not always is she right. But she loved us, and she did a lot for us, and I could understand her concern, not then, but I do now.
It was July 28th. He didn't normally come to Hayes because he was so busy with the farming, but because it was my birthday, he came down, and we went driving as usual, and we ended up in the Hayes Park. They had a nice little park there, and he proposed there, asked me if I would marry him. Of course, I said yes. And we set the date for August the 23rd. And that was just before my school started. I was teaching in an 8-month school. That's why I was there early before their school was out, is because of the shortened. But I taught in a country school, and they only went 8 months so that the boys could be in the fields helping with the field work. I don't think I was expecting it, so I was kind of a little bit surprised. But we picked out the date real fast because I was going to go back to teaching, and so we had to work it in between so we could have a honeymoon, and everything before I started back. The night before Bill and I were buried, my older sister Ruby, and the next one was, next to her was Marilyn, and we all three slept in that bed together the night before we were married. But they put me in the middle. I was in the middle that night. I just remember that so plainly. So I never had a bedroom by myself ever till we got married. And then we've shared one ever since. I guess we started out with us double bed, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And then we graduated to queen, and now I don't know how we did that, because now we both think we have to have a king. Even when we travel, we like a king, but we don't want to sleep in separate beds. But we don't have to. If he snores a little bit, that's okay. I don't mind. He's there. Not like him there. Yeah. We were married in the Church of God in Lenore, Kansas. The church I'd grown up with and had gone to all the children's meetings there. Oh, my wedding dress was so pretty. Had little bitty buttons all down the back and a flowing train. I had a little train bearer that carried it. And a little pearly crown that I wore. It was very pretty. On our 50th, my daughter had smuggled the dress out, and she had it hanging at our 50th, my wedding dress. And I haven't seen it since, so I think it's up at Patty's.
I had an uncle that I was very, very close to, and I wanted him in the wedding. And so did something a little bit different than what most people did, but I had him be my best man. And then I had my cousin, and then there were about 3 other guys that I ran around with in high school, and they were part of the wedding party.
My sister Ruby was my maid of honor. Marilyn, the next sister in line, and Betty Day was a good friend, and she stood up with me. It was my baby sister, Joyce. She was a little flower girl, and June was one of the train bearers. They had a white carpet down, but still the train was dragging, so she lifted it up. And then my brothers, Wade and Glenn, they seated people in the church.
The one thing I remember about the wedding is I didn't have, a suit or anything before, and so my parents took me and got a suit and a new pair of shoes. I hadn't worn the shoes before, and a nail was up in the heel on one of them. And there wasn't anything I could do but put up with that. And that had a lasting bearing on my remembrance of of the wedding.
Of a memory of, he sent his little brother out to the car to get, I think, the other pair of shoes. And he didn't lock the door. And it was full of rice. They threw rice in because the door was unlocked, so they were able to get in the car. But he had told him to be sure you lock that door, but he didn't. He just forgot. Kids do that. They forget. Just forgot to lock that door.
Back then, anyone that got married, you had to put up with quite a bit after the ceremony was over. And they, decorated everything. I don't think they do that so much now, but they hung tin cans behind the car, and the thing that really irritated me was that they took my hubcaps off and filled them full of rocks and put them back on, and they didn't get one of them back on right, and I lost it probably 10 miles out of town because we took off. And actually they follow you for a long ways, but I had a car that was a little faster than any that they had, and they found the hubcap, and so they had it when I got back. Yeah. on our wedding night, my sister lived in Colorado, and so we decided, since she couldn't come to the wedding, that we would drive all the way there. And they had a shack out, and they had a bed in it, just a regular-sized bed in the shack, and so that's where we spent our honeymoon. We got in there probably around 10 o'clock at night, maybe a little later than that, and they waited up on us, so, because they'd never met Valeta. And so we communicated back and forth with letters, and of course we hadn't seen Cindy, my new little niece, either. And so it was quite an experience. And so we stayed in the shack that night, and then she fixed breakfast for us the next morning, and then we left because she had an uncle in Idaho, and that's where our honeymoon was going to be, because it didn't cost anything other than the gas to get out there, and gas was very cheap, back then. And so we went out there and spent probably 4 or 5 days.
My uncle's name was Carl Jones, and he lived in Fayette, Idaho at that time. My uncle always wanted to adopt me because they didn't have any children at first, but they ended up with 5. But my parents said no, they wouldn't let me go. So he was real special to me. So that's our destination, because I hadn't seen him in years.
We had a really good experience at her uncle's. They really treated us well, and it didn't cost us anything. And
we had a great time. Went swimming and all kinds of things. And he didn't know how to swim. I thought he was going to drown. So, because he gets to this pool that's over his head, but he made it to the side, so I couldn't believe it, getting in that pool and not being able to swim.
My dad wouldn't let me around water. He had a brother that drowned in a creek, and he was afraid of water because everybody else was, and her uncle thought that he was really treating us well, and he was, to not get in the water and swim was just something I didn't want to not do. So, but it worked out.
But we also stopped in Yellowstone, and coming to Craters of the Moon. What happened to the car? Something.
Oh, we had to cross a desert that was about 100 miles across the desert, and halfway across my car quit. And so I got out and opened the hood. Of course, living on a farm, you know engines, motors, and so I started to see what was wrong with it. And back then, you had points, a set of points that provided where the electricity from your battery went through, and they had broken. And so there was no way to fix that. And so we are in the middle of the desert, and I caught a car stopped and asked me what the problem was, and I told them, and so they said, well, we're going into Idaho Falls, which was 48 miles. And so I took the points off of the car, off the carburetor, then caught a ride in, and she stayed in the car because we had, back then, I guess that wasn't too unusual, but I don't know if that was the thing. I probably wouldn't do that now, but that's what she wanted to do, stay with the car, because we had all of our clothes and everything in it. And so I went in, and I got a set of points for it, and came and then caught a ride back with somebody. I don't know, of course, I was probably gone 4 or 5 hours, maybe.
Long time.
Maybe a long time. And back then, when everything west was silver dollars. When we left together, of course, she was working, and she didn't have very much of a bank account, but she had enough money that we could take a honeymoon on. My parents gave me some, but anyway, we had $300 is what we had, and so we still had quite a few of those left. I think like maybe 25 or 30, because everything was silver. Whenever you spent any money there, everything that came back was in silver dollars.
Yeah, our first year of marriage, we lived in my hometown. We had a nice little house there in that town, and I drove to school. Bill was able to get a job at the grocery store there in that town. So that's what we did till I was out 8 months later when the school was closed. Then we moved to Almena, and a house just a block from his parents. Mm-hmm. And we lived there 1 year.
Yeah, the first year I farmed until the wheat was drilled and the corn was picked and the milo was cut, because I ran the combines and everything. My dad didn't like to do that, and I did. And so as soon as all the crops were in, then is when I got a job at the grocery store, and stayed in Lenore then, which was the town that she grew up in. And then as soon as this farming started, which was in mid-April, then I didn't work at the grocery store anymore. And I drove back and forth which was 35 miles, until her school was out, which was, the schools then were 8 months. 8 month schools. Mm-hmm. And so by the 1st of May, she was out anyway. And so then we moved to Almena, and I farmed through that summer, and it was a great move. Yeah.
I was teaching at the 8-month school, and after I got pregnant, well, he was very protective of me, because there was one time when he could hardly, it was so muddy, but he made it out there. And then one time he tried to come, he was out, he came to get me, and we started back, and we got in this horrible snowstorm. It just was piled up. And so we got stuck, and he said, well, I'll walk and find a place. I said, you don't know this area. You are not walking by yourself. So I got out, and we walked back to a farmhouse. Of course, I knew the area very, very well, because I probably would have lost him right there in the snow if I hadn't have gone back with him. If he was determined to come out there, he would come. I don't care if it was muddy or snowy. So I was very busy that first year that we were married with the school till we got out in I suppose April, because that's when usually the last of April is when the 8-month schools let out.
The year that we got married, I farmed 1 year, and it wasn't going to work out. The farm, the crops weren't very good, and he and I didn't see eye to eye on what to do, as could be. And as I got older, I thought, well, he really did know a little bit more than I gave him credit for. So anyway, Valeta was teaching, and I had 1 year of school, so I thought, I'm going to go back to college. And I went ahead and worked that year with him, and then through the next summer. But then when fall got there, I told him that I wasn't going to farm anymore. And he was very, very upset about that, and said that I would starve, and that I wasn't coming back. And I understand that, that's just the way it was, because most of the kids stayed right there. In that time, in a farming community, it wasn't unusual for people never to be out of the county, ever. And so, but we did work it out.
I think I'm a lot more tolerant of things, more worldly things. Like when I was first married, he said, if you don't keep tea in the refrigerator, I'll put beer in. Well, that was a no-no, because we did not drink beer and I wasn't having it in my refrigerator, you know. So now he doesn't even drink the tea. I don't even make tea nowadays. No, but he used to drink lots of iced tea. I think I'm more tolerant than I used to be of what other, especially of other people, the way they were raised and things. Where I was raised one way and a lot of people were raised a different way.
The one thing, that I have changed is I grew up. When I was, married at 18 with no experiences, and then in about 10 months, Patty came along, and that had to change. That really was a blessing because at that point I knew that I had to make a living, for my family, and it wasn't going to happen what I was doing, and so I had to make a commitment at that point, which I had not had to do before, to take a risk. Just about anything that happened, we had to work together on it to make it work, because if we made a mistake, it was going to affect both of us. I think I grew up and found out that you can make things work if you try hard enough. And I think that was a big change, and it's paid off all the way through because we've taken many, many, many risks. I think both of you need to have responsibilities that are basically your responsibility, but they can cross over at any time when it's more convenient, and do things as a couple. Now that you're not always going to do that, because there's times if you get involved in organizations and things like that, like I do. I belong to a coffee group and I belong to a Bible study group, and she doesn't belong to either one of those. But when we have socials, we're all together. Mm-hmm. So there are times, that in your careers are going to separate you, but when you can, just like raising your kids, one thing that our kids understood early on, you don't go to one parent and get an answer and don't like the answer and then go to the other one, because mm-hmm. that is trouble city for you. So you have to support one another. And that doesn't mean you're not going to disagree, but that needs to be talked about. And I think, to disagree is fine. You need to, if you're a human being, you need to, but you need to come together, and you may decide, well, for this I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to do it this way, and you agree that that's okay.
Do things together, and if and when you have children, as he was saying, they learned early on not to go to the other person and ask them. But if when in the discipline, one of them does something and you've disciplined him and he didn't like it, he didn't say anything. And the same way with me. If he did discipline and I didn't like what he did, we didn't say anything. But afterwards, when the kids were completely out of the picture, then we would discuss it and tell why we thought it was not a good decision or something like that. And I think that's important, to not disagree right in front of them, because I think that was a good lesson for both of them to know that Mom is going to support Dad, and Dad's going to support Mom, and whatever the decisions were. So, and do things together all the time. Even though at the beginning it's tough, you can get, and you don't have hardly any money, that isn't the important thing. Family is the important thing, and church, especially church. Yeah. And so I say God is first, and then family, and so.
We just don't have any family that are our family that we're responsible for that we aren't proud of. And And that's, not a lot of families can say that. Why God has done that for our family, I don't know. And maybe I don't need to know. All I know is that that's the way it is, and I kind of think that none of this happened just on what we did or what we didn't do. I think there was a divine influence on that. It has to be, because for whatever reason, I don't know. I just know that's the way it is.